So next up, okay, so the boys are going to talk about Pet Cemetery here.
Oh,
Oh
insane.
man. Um, I don't know, Joe. What is there to say about this
All right,
crazy, crazy book?
I'm gonna start off. I finished Pet Sematary. I finished
R-
it Sunday or Monday night. I
Real
can't remember.
quick, this is the book, not the recent film we're
Yes, this
talking.
is the
Yes.
book by Stephen King. We're talking about the book, Bradley and I's book club.
Yeah.
Uh, I finished it. Bradley, I don't know how much longer you have left in the book.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit into part two.
Okay.
I had been going slowly, and then I learned that Joe had finished, and then I learned that we kind of wanted to talk about it this week. So I sped up a lot. On Sunday, I read 100 pages. Yesterday, I read about 50. So I'm a little bit into part two.
Right.
I haven't finished, but I feel like I can have some kind of grasp on
Yeah,
the
and
direction the book is going and kind
yeah.
of the
Um,
themes.
and I'm gonna talk about that a lot. So I like this book. I have some problems with it, but I also really like a lot of the themes this book is talking about. And so, to give an overview, the book is essentially about a guy named Lewis Creed, who moves to Maine with his family. He has a wife, a young daughter named Ellie, and a 2-year old named Gage. Um, and they live next to like a country road that has a bunch of like trucks speed right past his house all the time. Uh, so one day the cat gets hit by one of these trucks and dies, and his neighbor Judd tells him, "Well, there's a place called the Pet Cemetery where you bury all your pets, but if you go just past it, and by just past I mean like 3 or 4 miles,
Yeah,
uh, just past it, you'll find an old ancient Indian burial ground. Whatever you bury there comes back to life about 3 days later." And that's all I'm going to give for the plot because
it's the that's I mean that's the premise. I mean
that's the premise essentially. Um, so I would say this book is in like my top 20 books I've read. I wouldn't say top 10. I wouldn't say top five. And I think partially of that to me is um is I don't want to say the ending was bad because I actually think the ending was good. I just felt like the climax was rushed and too short for me.
yeah
But that's about it.
yeah, and that's fair. And I haven't seen the climax yet, um, and it's kind of weird, right? Because I'm over halfway through this book, and I feel like it took till about halfway through the book before we really got into like the meat of what's going to be like truly happening
Right.
in the book. Even if you could see it coming before then, a little over halfway is where it starts happening. So I'm like, okay, you know, how is this going to escalate? How is it going to resolve? So I could see
Mhm.
that. And like I said, the a lot of people come to Stephen King books for the horror, and if you're looking for the horror, it doesn't start till about 60 pages in,
Yeah.
which I'm totally fine with that because I can do with a slow burn. But um, some people would probably be like, okay, can we, fucking get on with it?
Yeah.
Question from the gallery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How is the horror in this book? I've never read a horror
So
book,
Oh man.
so I don't really know what a horror book would really entail. Please
so
tell me about that.
yeah. How do I explain this? The big horror in this book, and Brad, you can like talk to me and or you can like
Yeah.
say like no, I disagree. But the big horror to me in this book is existential dread.
Uh, Hello. And I think this thunderstorm is really gonna make this a pain in the ass. But Joe, tell me about the existential dread of Pet Cemetery.
Yeah, so there's a lot of existential dread, and it's mainly about death and dying and people dying around you and like how to deal with that. Grief is a big theme in this book. And after reading this, I feel a lot better about people dying and death and all of that. And I'm not saying like, I want everyone to die. It's just like I feel more comfortable with the idea of death in life kind of deal.
Yeah,
You know?
and I was having the exact same thought, and I thought it was really weird because the book simultaneously makes me extremely anxious about either me or someone I know dying, but also more comfortable about
Yeah.
those things at the same time,
God, that's
which
really
is weird.
interesting.
Yeah.
I can you. How does the book do that? I guess in a non-spoiler. Is it even? I mean, I guess y'all can go into spoilers. I don't think I'm going to read this.
Okay.
Uh, but I might
Uh,
watch the movie, so you can
Uh,
go half
so,
spoilers.
okay, so I looked up the plot of the recent movie.
yeah.
And it's essentially the same up until um the part two start.
Okay.
You've read the first page of part two, right? Because that basically tells you the big thing that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's different. That's a different character that happens to.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which I don't think is a. I can understand why they would make that choice for a movie,
Yeah.
but I don't. I prefer the Stephen King of that better.
Yeah.
Uh, because and I'll get into why when we talk about spoilers. But so my next question is, Bradley, where are you in the book in terms of like what is Lou doing at this point?
Yeah. So, um,
So spoilers now.
yeah, if I guess we're going into spoiler territory. So,
Yay!
I've reached the beginning of part two, and part two is where Lewis and Rachel's son, their toddler Gage, dies. And he's a victim of the trucks on the highway that we've seen passing by since like the first, like maybe page of the novel.
Like every other like every time they're at the house, there's the mention of this of a truck just blaring by.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
And it's really creepy. And they did something leading up to where part two of the book starts. There's a really interesting thing Stephen King did. He did it with Gage, and he also did it with Norma before that, where just out of nowhere, it's like a totally normal sentence. Like, I think they were just chilling at the house, and it's like this took place 10 weeks before Norma would die, and then it
Yeah.
just continues talking.
Yeah, no, I had to reread that sentence like twice.
Yeah, I was like, do you want to roll that back for a second? Like,
Yeah.
Is this literary jump scares? Is that what?
Kind of.
that's kind of one of them.
Yeah. But it does a great thing because it prepares you to what's going to happen. But at the same time, it almost sets a bomb in your brain where it's like, this is going to happen. I know this is going to happen, but I don't know when it's going to happen. I know, well, it tells you in 10 weeks, but you don't really get an idea of what 10 weeks is in book time because you just go page by page.
That's really so. Two things about that. The bomb analogy is really good because Alfred Hitchcock is allegedly the master of suspense and horror. Like that's the title he's been given, right?
He sets elements up that are just gonna pay off big time.
Exactly.
You said Alfred Hitchcock. Did you mean to say Alfred Hitchcock?
Yes.
Okay.
The director.
Yes.
Not Stephen King. Yeah, Hitchcock. He has a famous analogy of a bomb where a conversation is happening and then boom, an explosion happens, and that's kind of shocking. But he finds it way more suspenseful to show the viewer that there's a bomb under the table, and then show the conversation going as normal.
Yeah.
And now the viewer has the building dread of like, what are they going to do about the bomb?
Yeah, it's that exact same. It's that exact same kind of setup.
Yeah, it's
Really
called
good setup.
dramatic irony. That's the literary term for it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's irony that which the audience knows more than the player, the characters in the play, or the book or the story. Essentially, you know something more than the characters do.
You know, another thing that did that recently is a little series called JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Oh my god.
Joe knows. Anyways, back to your regular scheduled pet death.
So yeah, so like the Gage dying was pretty foreshadowed, and I think I'm gonna talk a little bit ahead of you, Bradley, but it's not gonna spoil too much.
That's fine.
I feel. But essentially, you really don't get the details of Gage's death until about like a third into part two.
Yeah.
And it breaks it down like step by step.
Like exactly how it played out.
Yeah, and you see what's happening, you know what's gonna happen, and like you're kind of like holding on, like just like I just want to get through what's happening because I know what's happened. I've already come to the conclusion of what's happened. I just need it's like the slow ripping of a band-aid. So and you kind of get this so you I want to talk about more about like how he makes death easier, but I can't get into that because it spoils a very important.
Here's what I'm thinking. So when Bradley finishes
Yeah.
the book, we'll have a follow up, and then you can get into spoilers about that, and then you guys right here can discuss everything up and leading to that, so we can cover it.
Yeah. So that's one thing that I want to talk about. But the other thing the main thing that I feel like beforehand that really talks about making it feel better for death is two things. Judd has a great line in which he says, "Sometimes dead is better."
Yeah, and that's like the iconic line. Like even people who have virtually, like people who don't know anything else about Pet Sematary usually know that line, and that was also me.
I knew this line. I think now that you mention it, I've definitely heard that before.
So that gets said. Like when Judd is explaining the Pet Cemetery or explaining the Mimmac graveyard and behind it. The other thing is, so halfway into part 1, their pet cat Church dies, and Church is like is beloved by Ellie. This is like her favorite. Like she doesn't go anywhere without him, and so she has this like complete breakdown at the beginning of the book that she's afraid that Church is going to die.
Yeah.
And the dad's a doctor. And he's like, death is just part of life. And he's just kind of like to wave it off and say like, oh, she'll get over it and whatever. But then the cat dies, and the dad's just like, well, fuck. She's going to be upset that the cat has died now.
And he's like, he just doesn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm. At all. And Judd comes along and tells him about the cemetery, and they go bury the cat. And the cat comes back, and the cat is immediately like not himself.
Yeah, it's clearly acting different than it was before.
Yeah, he's sluggish. He's not graceful. Like he just like runs into things. He'll go off and just kill animals and bring them back to the house and not eat them, just like kill them and then like stack them in a pile in the garage.
Does the family accept the cat back into the house because the little girl wants him back?
Man, can I quote a certain line?
Please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Whenever Ellie, Lewis's daughter, gets back and she sees her cat Church again for the first time since she, went on vacation, she is immediately
like this whole thing happened while his family was off on Thanksgiving vacation. He has to stay behind because he's in charge of like the medic system, the medical office at his university.
Yeah, but this girl doesn't know her cat ever died. It came back to life. She gets back. She's like, "Oh, there's my cat." She's like, "Oh, it stinks," and she's like, "Oh, he's acting weird and stuff like that." But there's one line that was just like, "Holy shit" to me, and I think it was after Norma had died, and Lewis was kind of talking to his daughter about how to handle these feelings she's having. And when she was on her way out of his room to go to bed, she's like, Dad, if Church died, I think I'd be able to handle it. And then immediately after she says it, like her hands go up to her mouth, like, holy shit, did I just say that? Because it's a really terrifying thought to have that about somebody that you love, but they even address that with other people. That's a very real thought people have in real life. Like when a loved one has been in the ICU for many, many months, a lot of people will say, sometimes dead is better.
Yeah. There's a really good movie that the whole movie is an abstraction of that very theme.
It's called Pet Sematary.
Well, there's the whole like being able to admit the fact that you just want the person, like you could handle the death. I don't want to say the movie's name, because getting to that point is a really big revelation of the movie. But I generally like that theme. You guys are selling me on this Pet Sematary thing. I gotta say.
Yeah. There's another scene that happened right after that. And it's the very end of part 1. It's almost like the climax of part 1.
Yeah.
Because part 1 is very much the existential talk about like the before death.
Yeah.
Like, how do you deal with death when you know it's coming, kind of deal. And part 2 is about how do you deal with death when it's already happened and how that affects people. So in part 1, um, very early on, it talks about how I forget what her name is, but Lewis's wife had a sister named Zelda, who
Yes.
died. And you kind of just told like, oh, she died of a disease, and you're not really told like what else until you get to the very end, right after Norma dies.
And Rachel describing her sister's death
Yeah,
was one of the hardest things for me to read in the book. Like,
yeah.
holy shit, it was horrifying.
And it talks about how like, she talks about how like, when that person's on their deathbed, you want to feel sorry for them and you want to feel bad for them, and you want to do that, but there comes a point where this person is so sick and they are so needy and they feel like they deserve everything that you just want that person to die, and you can't, and you just don't. And it's just an awful thought to have, because this is my sister, this is the person that I've grown up with, who's my big sister. I love her, my parents love her, but that's not my sister anymore. She has gone beyond that, and now she just lashes out, and it's a horrifying like kind of thought process and dread of like, oh my god, just having to deal with that. And I think like she has to deal with that for like 2 years.
Yeah, and she felt terrible when her sister died, because she felt terrible because she was so relieved that her sister died. And she was even terrified for so long that she assumed like her sister's ghost could tell that she was relieved and it would try to kill her or haunt her.
Oh my god.
Brad, I can't wait for you to finish the book and we come back and talk about this.
Oh my god. It's already so good, and I'm really scared because I think I had talked to you guys about this before. The reason I decided to read this book in the first place is because there was a discussion on books that people didn't finish. And most of the, books people talked about were like, this book wasn't that great, I didn't like it, stuff like that. This book, the person's like, oh, it's one of my favorite books of all time. I didn't finish it because as soon as I knew it was going to happen at the end, I knew I wouldn't be able to take it if I got that far.
And so to kind of bring it back, but yeah, but like after reading through all of that and everything else happened in the book, it's just like, I'd rather just not deal with that. And so it kind of just brings this idea of like, death is just a process, and you're going to be upset and you're going to grieve, but it's a process. It's just something that happens, but it's something that happens, and it's something you just have to get over and you have to work through. It's not a solvable problem.
Yeah, it's really impressive because it is a very terrifying book at points, but I do feel like overall I feel like I'm getting something really good out of it.
Yeah.
If I had to kind of wrap up my current thoughts on Pet Sematary, especially as far as like the subject matter and the horror, it is a horror book. I'd say unlike some Stephen King stuff, there are supernatural elements to this book, and they are key to the plot. But what makes Pet Sematary truly horrifying is the stuff that's real, and that is real, and that is going to happen to you or someone someday. And I think the reason he was able to make it so real is that, didn't Stephen King
he did a bunch of research on like grieving and people that went through these tragedies.
Yeah, he was also inspired by funeral directors and stuff. So it's very real, and that's what's scary about it. But overall, like Joe said, I probably wouldn't put it like in my top 10 or something. But I mean, I would consider it a classic, and I think people should read it.
Yeah, I would say like if someone was asking for a book and then someone said, "Is Pet Sematary good?" Like, read that book.
I'd say it's good to read.
I wouldn't like go like, well, what's a good book to read? I probably wouldn't recommend Pet Sematary because I feel like you need to be in the mindset to kind of process that.
Yeah.
And you have to be really prepared to like, this is a book about dying, and like and that's like the whole plot and the whole theme. So you're going to be talking about you and your loved ones dying to yourself that whole book. So yeah.
That's really interesting. Like, I might actually check this out after this discussion, and I definitely, I want to hear a part two of you guys talking about it.
I
We'll
got a
definitely.
whole thing about part two where like this book is written like a Shakespearean tragedy.
Ooh, Joe's got
Uh,
some shit. He's
yeah.
in the back pocket. I definitely want a lot more time to this. Whenever Bradley finishes, we don't want to rush him.
Yeah.
I would be
No need
finished
for
in the
rushing.
next day or two if I go at my current pace. So
Hey, next
I think we'll be
podcast
good.
then for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, y'all want to say anything else before we move on? We'll definitely come back to this.
I do want to say something else. Willard, it took me several minutes to realize back during the Game of Thrones talk that when you said "oh penis," you were saying like NESS and not like
Yes.
NIS.
Yeah, there we go.
I was like, what? I was like, why do you say "oh penis"?
Oh,
Um,
go ahead, Joe.
so my recommendation is if you like books that kind of really want to challenge, not challenge, but kind of like make you think about existential crises and has a bit of horror elements and really kind of talks about the dynamics of family and death and like what that has and that effect it has on the family, I would totally tell you to go pick this up. If you're looking for a book that's a supernatural horror story and like has ghosts and shit in it, this isn't the book for you. There's the big kind of spooky net supernatural stuff doesn't come until the end and it's very quick. But if you're someone that really likes that kind of real life tension and that like kind of oh god, this could be me situation, I would definitely pick that up. That's you'll get that feeling for sure.
It's a good book.
Yeah.
That's the rating. It's a good book out of
It's a
5.
good book.